Today we are diving into the old Tri Tip Dagger versus Needletick debate. The Tri Tip Dagger is a white rarity item which has a 10% plus an additional 10% per stack chance to bleed an enemy on hit for 240% base damage. As you can see here, this bleed status effect is indicated by the little red blood drops that appear over the enemy, and the damage done by it is shown by these red hit markers. On the other hand, the Needletick, which is the void variant and will corrupt all the Tri Tip Daggers that you currently have, has a 10% chance to apply the collapse status effect, which will deal 400% base damage 3 seconds after initially being applied. And while you definitely don't need to be a mathematician to recognize the fact that collapse has an on paper higher damage output of 400 to bleeds 240, the real difference between these two lies in the fact that stacks of collapse will always expire 3 seconds after the initial stack is applied to an enemy. On the other hand, bleed can be continuously reset, so the timer for the bleed stack is reset as soon as a new stack of bleed is applied to the enemy, allowing you to get some absolutely nutty amounts of bleed if you have enough tri-tip daggers and enough attack speed. Now, knowing the difference between the two, as a general rule of thumb, I would recommend that if you are playing as a survivor who has a pretty fast attack fire rate, so survivors such as Commando, Huntress, Engineer with his turrets, Auto Nailgun Multi, Void Fiend, Captain, and Rex, then I would stick with tri-tips because you'll be able to apply and reapply stacks of bleed faster than they disappear, which will allow you to get some pretty high bleed stacks and do more damage than if you had Needletick. On the other hand, if you are rocking with one of the survivors who have a lower fire rate, such as Acrid, Artificer, Bandito, Railgunner, or Loader, then I would generally take the Needletick, as you won't usually be able to inflict bleed stacks fast enough to keep on stacking them, and the damage advantage of collapse wins over on these survivors, at least as long as you aren't looping. As with any rule, there are exceptions to this one, and the first being that if you're planning on looping, it's generally speaking better to take tri-tips just because bleed damage is better in the long run as you get more items and more attack speed, even on those aforementioned slow fire rate survivors. Another exception is if, once again, you have very high attack speed due to picking up a bunch of soldier syringes, some Mocha Jokas, or even predatory instincts, then it's also probably better to keep the tri-tips and not corrupt them if you find a Needletick. There is one situation where you should probably be picking up the Needletick regardless of who you are playing as and your attack speed, and this is if you have the Shatter Spleen yellow item as well as a bunch of crit glasses and the Death Mark. In this situation, it's definitely worthwhile to pick up Needletick because you'll already be able to apply bleed separately with the Shatter Spleen and crit glasses, and that additional debuff helps proc the Death Mark. And last but not least, if you're feeling lucky punk and you happen to stumble across a 57 leaf clover, then I would also recommend keeping tri-tip as well, because you are just that much more likely to keep on applying stacks and keep the bleed going. Anyways, that's pretty much it. Thanks for tuning on in, and we'll catch you next time. Adios, amigos.